There are moments in life when everything seems quiet, not peaceful, but painfully silent, as if the world has turned its back, and the only thing louder than your heartbeat is your own doubt. For Adrian, that silence had grown louder over the years, like a foghorn in his mind, reminding him of every failure, every missed opportunity, every voice that said he wouldn't make it. He wasn't born into privilege. He wasn't gifted a map to success. What he had was a room in the back of a rusted house, a stack of bills his mother couldn't pay, and a pair of shoes with holes so wide they swallowed his dreams every time he stepped into the rain. But silence isn't emptiness, it's a space waiting to be filled. With effort, with courage, with fire. Every day, Adrian woke before the sun, not because he wanted to, but because anxiety never let him sleep. The world moved without waiting, and so did he. He worked odd jobs, dishwasher, janitor, delivery guy. People never looked twice at him. To them, he was just another invisible figure in the background of their busy lives. But inside Adrian, something stirred, something ancient, a quiet rebellion against the limits placed on him. He didn't have the words for it then, but it was a hunger, one that grew each time someone said, "You're not enough." And perhaps that hunger was the beginning of something extraordinary. Time has a strange way of blurring the edges of who we are. We begin to forget the fire that once lived in our chest, the dreams that once danced behind our eyes. For Adrian, that forgetting became a quiet routine. Wake, work, exist, repeat. But even in routine, there are moments that shatter the sudden, unexpected flashes of truth that cut through the fog like lightning. It happened on an ordinary day, while wiping tables in a diner. A man walked in, well-dressed, confident, the kind of person whose presence made others straighten up. Adrian didn't look twice until he overheard something. "Back then I was working 2 jobs just to survive," the man said, laughing over coffee. "Nobody believed in me until I believed in myself." That line hit Adrian like a punch to the chest. Nobody believed in me until I believed in myself. He froze, cloth in hand, his reflection trembling in the metal napkin holder on the table. In that tiny, warped reflection, he saw someone tired, someone worn down, someone who no longer believed in himself. But what if belief didn't have to come from success? What if belief was the first brick you laid before the walls of your life ever rose? That night, Adrian stood in front of a cracked mirror in his room. He stared at himself not as a victim of circumstance, but as a man standing on the edge of change. He whispered it, almost afraid of the words. "You are not broken, you are becoming." The mirror didn't respond, but something inside did. From that day on, things began to change, not outside, but within. He still worked 2 jobs. He still came home exhausted. But now he did one more thing. He read, he studied, he trained. Every night, while others slept, Adrian was becoming, slowly, quietly, but relentlessly. Growth is a lonely road. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or praise. It comes disguised as failure, rejection, and silence. Adrian learned that the hard way. The more he tried to improve, the more resistance he met. He started applying for better jobs. No replies. He submitted ideas online, hoping to freelance. No response. He reached out to mentors, sent emails, even walked into offices only to be met with indifference. Or worse, that polite, empty smile that says don't waste your time. It was during these days that the fog crept in. Not literal fog, but a mental haze. The kind that settles over your heart when effort isn't met with results. The kind that makes your mind whisper, maybe this isn't for you. But Adrian remembered something. Every mountain is surrounded by fog near the bottom. That's where the ground is cold, the air is thick, and the summit seems impossible to see. He began to understand a truth many never do. Success isn't about having clarity, it's about moving forward even when you can't see more than a few feet ahead. So he kept going. Some days he studied until his eyes burned. Other nights he ran miles through quiet neighborhoods, training his body while his mind repeated, "I am not who I was. I am who I'm becoming." The fog didn't lift overnight. It rarely does. But every time Adrian showed up for himself, every time he chose progress over comfort, the fog thinned just a little. People around him still didn't notice the change. But change isn't about being seen. It's about becoming the person you promised yourself you would be. And in that fog, Adrian made a silent promise to himself. No matter how long it takes, no matter how quiet the road, I will not stop climbing. Sometimes, life doesn't whisper. It roars. One phone call, one moment, one storm strong enough to knock down the foundation you've been quietly building. For Adrian, the call came late on a Wednesday night. His mother, his anchor, his strength had collapsed. "A heart attack, hospital, ICU." The words hit like bricks. He rushed to the hospital, mind spinning. Machines beeped, doctors spoke in terms he didn't understand, and all he could do was sit beside her, holding her hand, whispering prayers into the sterile air. She had worked herself to the bone to raise him, and now, just as he was beginning to rise, she was fading. Adrian didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of her, but inside. Something cracked. The following days were a blur. Hospital visits, bills piling up, long hours at work. Everything he had tried to build, his routine, his growth, his training, was buried under the weight of survival. That's the storm. The moment when you're tested, not at your best, but at your lowest. It would have been easy to give up, to fall back into comfort, to let go of the dream and focus only on getting by. But sometimes the storm doesn't destroy you, it reveals what's unshakable. In the quiet moments between exhaustion and grief, Adrian felt a spark, not of motivation, but of purpose. He realized this wasn't just about proving himself, this was about becoming strong enough to carry those he loved. His mother opened her eyes a week later, weak but alive. When she smiled at him, something inside him ignited. It was no longer just about him now. He had something to protect. So he made a decision. He would not shrink under the storm. He would become the storm. He doubled down, took extra shifts, sold his few belongings, turned his pain into fuel, woke up earlier, trained harder, studied longer. The world had thrown its worst at him and he was still standing. The spark had become a fire. Real growth begins the moment you let go of the safety net. Adrian had always carried a quiet fallback in his heart, some version of a safe life, one where he could settle for good enough if the dream didn't work out. But now, after everything, his mother's illness, the setbacks, the silent battles, he realized he couldn't climb with one hand on the ledge and one hand on the rope. He had to let go. He quit his second job, not out of recklessness, but because it no longer aligned with who he was becoming. He began investing in himself, his skills, his body, his brand. He created a plan, wrote it on paper, read it aloud every morning like scripture. There was no mentor, no investor, no cheerleader behind him, just the echo of his own voice in a dark room saying, "If you don't bet on yourself, who will?" It wasn't easy. Some nights he went without dinner. Some days he heard the voice of fear louder than any words of hope. But he didn't stop. Started a blog to share his journey. No one read it at first, but he kept writing. He recorded short motivational videos with a borrowed phone. No views, but he kept uploading. He emailed companies with proposals. Most ignored him, a few replied. One said yes, and with that tiny yes, the world cracked open just a little. Momentum began to build, not like an avalanche, but like a slow push of a mountain that had waited years to move. One opportunity led to another. A small podcast invite, a freelance contract, a gym sponsorship, a mentorship call. He was still poor, still hustling, but now, every day felt like one more stone laid on the path. He was carving. The rope was gone, but he wasn't falling. He was rising. Because sometimes, it's only when you climb without a rope that you realize you had wings all along. Most people think the summit is a place. They believe success is found in cars, money, fame, the applause of a crowd finally noticing what you've built. But Adrian had learned something different on his climb, that the true summit isn't out there, it's in here, in the mind, in the soul, in the relentless decision to rise day after day without a guarantee of reward. Now, for the first time in years, Adrian stood at a different kind of height. His videos had gone viral. His blog had readers from around the world. He was invited to speak on stages he used to dream about from behind a mop bucket. People called him inspiring, but they didn't know the whole story. They didn't see the cold mornings, the skipped meals, the nights he cried silently into a pillow so his mother wouldn't hear. They didn't see the hundreds of rejections, the hours spent studying when it would have been easier to sleep. And that was okay, because this journey was never about being seen. It was about becoming the kind of man he could respect in the silence of his own mind. He returned one day to that diner where he used to work, sat at a booth alone, looked at the seat where he once overheard that line, "Nobody believed in me until I believed in myself." He smiled, because now, he finally understood. The summit isn't a finish line. It's a realization that every scar, every trial, every tear was not punishment. It was preparation. Adrian didn't feel bigger than life. He felt aligned with it. No longer running from his past, no longer haunted by the silence, because inside that silence, he had found something most people never do, his own voice. The greatest stories never really end. They echo long after the lights fade and the applause dies, long after the headlines disappear and the cameras turn away. What remains is the fire that was lit in someone's heart because of your journey. Adrian understood this now. He had reached milestones. Yes, he had climbed higher than anyone expected. But the truth was, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where his role had changed, from survivor to leader, from struggler to guide. He began mentoring others not for fame, not for profit, but because he knew what it felt like to walk alone, to cry in silence, to doubt your worth. He became the voice he once needed. But even now, with his name printed on books, his videos watched by millions, he never let the fire die. Because success, real success, is not about what you achieve, it's about what you continue to strive for when you've already done enough. Each morning, he still woke early, still trained, still wrote, still reminded himself, you haven't made it, you've started. And that voice, the one that once whispered doubt, now whispered power. Keep climbing, keep growing, keep giving. Because there's always someone watching in the dark, waiting for proof that the light is real. Adrian had become that proof. And not just for them, for himself. Because the fire he built wasn't from winning, it was from refusing to quit. He carried that fire into every room, every conversation, every quiet moment when someone looked at him and asked, how did you do it? And he'd smile, not because he had all the answers, but because he knew the fire never faded. You never stop feeding it.